On the 6th of September, Prince William arrived for the first day at his new school. While the subject of obsessive interest from the media, little is actually known about the influences that have shaped his life to date. The importance of the next 5 years is unequivocal. School is the time when boys mature into men and knowledge becomes understanding. It is a place from which he will come to know not only his school fellows, but also his fellow countrymen, and which will provide a perspective for his view of the world. This film looks at the kind of education he is likely to receive there, and the influences and the ideas he will encounter. And it estimates his chances of emerging from Eton with the confidence, the character, and the powers of judgment that he will need to be a popular monarch and an effective one for the British people in the 21st century. Although it is one of our oldest schools, Eton would claim it has a bias to the future and not to the past. Yet it is impossible, wandering its courtyards and cloisters, to escape completely from the presence of the past. Inspired by the example of Winchester, the saintly King Henry VI founded the College of Eton on the meadows across the river from Windsor Castle to educate 70 scholars. Its chapel was designed to be a centre of pilgrimage, and together with King's College, Cambridge, it represents the lasting achievement of his reign. The legacy of its famous past lives on in the names of old boys and battles that line the walls of its cloisters and chapel. Their portraits given to the school as leaving gifts stare down from every room. Their names etched on marble plaques and carved deep into the wood and stone. It is this accumulation of time, old boys and buildings that forms the stable ground of tradition from which Eton looks to the future. And while the average boy would disclaim any interest in it, it is continually and eagerly renewed. On May the 7th this year, the boys and masters gathered in schoolyard for a VE Day remembrance service.
D, E and F on that side. F at the front, E in the middle, D at the back.
Above the school office flew the college's standard, bearing the emblems of Henry VI's two kingdoms, England and France. The 70 scholars, still supported by the income of largely medieval endowments, glide through the mass of ordinary boys or oppidans in white surplices. The foundation that controls the endowments is headed by the provost, wearing the red robes of an honorary doctor. He is accompanied by the vice provost, the headmaster, the conduct, who is the senior chaplain, and their wives. In his speech, the provost, a crown appointment since the time of the founder, reminds the present generation of Etonians of the sacrifices made by their predecessors.
Bronze tablets under this arcade behind it record the names of no less than 1,157 old Etonians who were killed in the First World War and 749 who were killed in the Second World War. Eton's losses were in percentage terms probably higher than any other institution in the country. I now ask the captain of the school on behalf of the foundation and the captain of the oppidans on behalf of the school to lay wreaths, and this will be followed by a minute's silence.
Dr. Andrew Gailey, who will be Prince William's housemaster, is an historian.
This is of the Duke of Wellington, famous of course for Waterloo, who was a boy in this house. And I have one or two French parents who rather dislike his prominent position. And I did manage to dig out a model of Napoleon, suitably small, I think. Some people may think that Eton is a very hidebound, traditional place in the negative sort of way, and they look at the uniforms and they look at various rituals and they assume it's lost in a past. But actually, it's a place that's naturally very dynamic because the young are not instinctively traditional. For them, anything is possible, anything can be changed. And consequently, it's vital that they have roots of which they can change from. They've got to know where they came from to know where they're going to. And tradition is the vital mechanism for this.
In fact, tradition is more evident in the superficialities of life at Eton than in its underlying realities. Both masters and boys dress in the white tie and tails of a century ago. The argot they use, of divs and dames, pop and debate, is equally out of date.
Beaks and masters, they wear waistcoats with collars, but they wear bow ties. They do actually have a uniform, which is quite nice, actually.
Many less amusing Etonian traditions have been allowed to die. Beatings are now a thing of the past. Fagging, in which younger boys act as unpaid servants to the older boys, has disappeared. But much of the ancient regime still survives. Everybody boards, there are no girls, games matter. It is more interested in being modern than in looking modern. It has to be.
Any system which is going to keep going has to be open a system and has to be constantly changing if it's going to survive. And not only survive, but keep its position in the world. And what we're talking about, the position of Eton, of course, we're talking about striving for excellence, which is a word easy to bandy around. But excellence in a whole series of areas.
Only 1% of Etonians fail an A-level. This remarkable record of success reflects the transition to a more meritocratic entry system where boys win a place at Eton by means of a competitive written examination and a demanding interview.
The last point of change was, I think, sometime in the 60s, early 70s. And I always feel that that was the change from the Eton of the established upper middle class, gentrified background to something much more like other schools, meritocratic, intellectually demanding, and carrying a whole series of other things on the side, carrying its traditional background on the side, carrying its sporting prowess on the side, carrying its curious festivities and fatuous clothes on the side. But the change there was to a school that would be first among equals academically, and in other words, delivering the modern product.
Ironically, competitive entrance has probably made Eton more elitist than ever. The increase in demand for private education has reinforced its exclusivity. Choosing boys solely on merit rather than on class or family has also diluted its heterogeneity. Although there are still families with strong traditional links with Eton. The Wellesleys have been going there for 8 successive generations following the first Duke of Wellington.
The first Duke's elder brother, Lord Wellesley, was a passionate Old Etonian, was a fellow, and indeed is buried in College Chapel.
I believe at the entrance to the north door.
I think that's right, yes.
So that the boys walk over him.
Every day.
Ian McKinnon was the lower master at Eton and is now headmaster of a school in Wellington, New Zealand. He thinks character matters more than background at Eton today, whether you are the son of a publican or a prince.
Commitment's quite a big factor at Eton, commitment to doing well in some, if not many areas. And boys might come from quite humble backgrounds, but they can still work their way through that system quite effectively. Boys, on the other hand, might come from very distinguished backgrounds and work their way through quite effectively. But if a boy, by the nature of his personality or character, to put it bluntly, rubs people up the wrong way, I don't think it matters a damn what part of that social vertical social area he comes from, you know, he won't be as well accepted as he might otherwise be.
One thing that has not changed is that Eton remains a male-dominated society.
As far as the criticism about it being single-sex is concerned, I think that's much more difficult because it's a trade-off between, you know, how good do you want your A-level results to be or how many girls do you want your sons to know. And we haven't worked that one out. The question is whether the boys would be actually better in their relationships with each other and with the opposite sex if they had girls alongside them all the time. It's a difficult question. Nobody seems to have got a satisfactory answer. It's not clear to me that co-educational schools uniformly produce better husbands, fathers, managers, governors than single-sex schools do. So why is there the certainty that the other will work?
The only women Prince William will regularly encounter at Eton are the dames, the house matrons responsible for looking after his physical needs and personal well-being, and the female beaks. It is working women, and not the traditional wife and mother, that some see as the important role model for the modern Etonian.
When they come into this lab, they don't see me as a woman, they see me as a physics beak. It's much more odd for some of the beaks and some of the boys' fathers. They react to women beaks much more oddly. They say things like, we didn't have women when we were at school. And so they see you first as a woman and second as you're doing your job. So what I'm saying is that the roles that women do that boys see aren't authoritative roles. But when they come across women in authoritative roles, they treat them as normal beaks.
If we're going to carry through the philosophy that the school now seems to be offering its boys, because what the boys still do need are good female role models.
Most of the boys would prefer females to female role models. They certainly get few opportunities to meet them which are not out of bounds. One of the few opportunities for boys to work with women is in the school theatre. There are 3 theatres which present up to 15 plays a year. Often productions can involve up to 100 people. As in this year's production of Guys and Dolls, girls from neighbouring schools take part. Backstage, the cast of Guys and Dolls remain just boys and girls. The powder is applied, microphones fitted, cues checked, and we are reminded that for some, I've never been in love before is unerringly true. While there may be plays, work is never far away.
What do you see as the immediate pressures when they arrive?
Work, without any doubt. I think the workload just jumps straight up. And some of them definitely struggle with that. Some of the slow boys struggle with that a lot. They get behind with work. Their work is, poor quality to the standard of work that beaks would expect. And I think they really are surprised by the amount of hours they're meant to sit down and put in.
The first thing new boys have to master is the bewildering organization and geography of the school, and the ruthless segmentation of the school day, in which a boy may be in the top div for history and the bottom div for maths.
Well, finding your way around the school is actually quite difficult, because from some places it takes 5 minutes or more to walk to another lesson.
The school covers an area of 2 square miles and has a total population of 3,500 boys, beaks and staff. Nothing demonstrates the sheer size of the place more than the washing the laundry handles each week.
They do about 60 to 80,000 pieces a week, which is basically anything from a boys' rugby shorts right away through to bed linen and masters' collars and boys' collars.
The 1,265 boys at the school are scattered across 25 houses of roughly 50 pupils apiece. The houses are divided into a private side occupied by a housemaster and a public side occupied by the boys.
Morning, sir.
The day begins with breakfast in the house, followed by chapel. Then come the first lessons, known as divs.
Divs are classes, divisions really, because they're all divided up.
Right.
So if you're bad at maths but good at something like Latin, you're not in the same class all the way through.
They have to be at every lesson on time. They're changing from a formal sort of school dress to perhaps formal change, and if they want to wear their own clothes, they can do that, but they always have to sort of be wearing the right thing at the right time.
There is no bell to help the boys get from one div to the next. They're expected from the outset to organize their own working day.
You look after your own timetable, don't you? There aren't any bells.
No, there are no bells. Well, there is a chapel bell. that is the chapel bell.
Punctuality is an essential part of life at Eton.
They rush in here sometimes. I'm sorry I'm late, ma'am. You're untidy book.
I was 2 minutes late for a reading school, and I'd just come back from High Street, and I was over there, just by Oldham and Blackwell. It was the Rothings waiting for me, and I was set 300 lines of Paradise Lost, which took me about 4 hours.
I would say it's a very pressurised atmosphere. I mean, there are times when I think, what am I achieving? Probably more than the average. You know, I think that more than imagine the average schoolboy would think, because of the hothouse atmosphere of the school.
And I find if I'm not in a hothouse atmosphere, if I'm not being pressurised to do well, I find I'm a bit of a vacuum in a way.
Learning to cope with the pressure does have the positive advantage that when they do leave, boys tend to cope with the greater pressures of the outside world more easily. The small boarding houses are instrumental in allowing the boys a chance to relax. Here, they find time to watch television, play snooker, or catch up with some phone calls. The house telephone being its most valuable asset. Each afternoon they meet in small groups for messing tea.
He was saying the thing behind all politics where it was all...
Houses often produce their own plays or films and celebrate their sporting victories with a house supper. Leo has made a candid camera type film of boys in the house, which he shows during a house society supper.
Here it is. It's called A Day in the Life of Somebody from Durnford House.
Well, you don't want to come here. Absolute mess. It smells too. Kept an eye on all the smokers, drinkers and gamblers in the house. Yeah, well, he's had a very good week at Cheltenham.
Time for an explanation, really. Yeah, I think time for an explanation.
No. Going for a walk.
Go for
it. On summer evenings, music issues from every window, and boys find time to rag around.
Tower, princes kept the view. Wandering stars, jumping jackfish, shooting gas, gas. Let's start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. For the time to the hurricane.
you've got to get away from school life sometimes, all the work and stuff. And it improves as you go up. Not improves, but there's a lot more work as you go further up to school. So you need to get away sometimes. You need to get away and relax. And coming here, this house is more like a home atmosphere than anywhere else.
Because you come to his house and you eat with him. Mr. Bristol and his wife has asked us to eat with him about real dinner for about 4 times. And they cook very nice meals. And you just feel so much more at ease, and you feel it's so nice to be able to talk to someone. Yeah. And if you don't like a beak, you can tell your tutor, and if you're not getting on in class, you can tell your tutor.
When I was at school, the relationships between boys and masters were very much more formal than it is now. But I think we're in danger of being a bit overprotective at the moment. We're asking people to come in really quite early in the evening and sign out when they go out and that sort of thing. I think we're a tiny bit overprotective.
This curious mixture of formality and informality between boys and beaks sometimes confuses the new boys.
I was coming back from the Beckington schools and I saw a beak who often teaches me, who'd been teaching me Latin. And I said, "Good evening, sir, how are you?" And he looked at me and said, I had just started, and he said, "Do you normally ask someone how they are at the end of a working day?" So I'm very sorry, sir, I was only trying to be polite. And he says, "Oh, yes, I quite understand your intention. However, it is rather rude to ask this." And I went very red and said, "I'm very sorry about that, sir. I'll try not to do it again." And he says, "Very good then. Good day to you," and walked away. And I just thought, oh dear.
Benedictus benedicam.
The school has 18 kitchens which serve over 4,600 meals a day. Half the boys eat in their houses, where lunch is presided over by the housemaster, while the remainder eat in a cafeteria. The exception to this are Henry's 70 scholars, who dine in the 15th century college dining hall. Their food is prepared below in a kitchen which has been in continuous use since 1440.
I believe this is one of the oldest working kitchens in the country, yes. They used to cook on the grill and the smoke used to go escape that way. Then they built the spits in 1736, which was quite a modern invention then days because it was automatic spit that used to turn itself on a lead weight and a spring. The boys love, obviously, sausage, egg, chips, beans, like any boy does, but they also like the lasagnas, the chicken tikka masalas. They like being adventurous. I think the 20th century has seen the major change. I mean, if you go in a pub 20 years ago, you're lucky you get a cheese roll, was you? Nowadays you can get a selection of food. It's the same as here.
So
20
this
years.
is no longer school dinners?
I don't think so, no. I think we get to a standard of a four-star hotel at times. We're aiming for 5-star. And the Michelin star.
Keep going.
Not only has the food become more liberal, but so too have institutions like POP. Originally made up of 25 senior boys, it was for centuries a harsh and self-elected oligarchy which until the 1970s had the power to beat and to fine their fellow pupils. In its modern and more open form, it continues to do a useful job and is still a sign of social success within the school. The badge of membership is a gaily coloured waistcoat.
I enjoy these sort of small customs we see which are unusual. You know, the way they line up at 11 o'clock to meet the masters out on the road there. When you see somebody from POP or from debate walking along in this slightly different uniform. I don't get the impression in the house that it's hidebound by any tradition. I think there's an awareness of the tradition, but you must remember, I mean, I just clean the lavatories.
Other traditions have almost died out. The wall game has been played for 250 years and was something held dear by old Etonian fathers and housemasters who in turn inspired their boys. With the number of old Etonian sons now down to under 30% and fewer old boy housemasters, the war game was, until recently, in decline.
The interpretation is a problem, yes. You have to have played it to make much sense of the rules.
The truth of this observation becomes evident as soon as the players are asked to explain the rules.
Well, you start off under the ladder up there. Well, there used to be a ladder. And you get a man on the ball who kneels on it. And you can't use your hands. And you can't pull it back, which is called furking. And if you do that, then that's a 10-metre offence. So obviously you don't want to do that because 10 metres is a long way.
There was a danger, I think, that the game might have faded away altogether. But we've got it going again, which is terrific.
The housemaster and his dame act in loco parentis to the boys in their care. For the most part, they encounter the same problems: homesickness, examination nerves, divorce, and occasionally bereavement.
I think boys are very good at being nice to those who are in a state. And it's quite interesting, for example, I had last year one or two people whose children whose names were all over the press. And it was very interesting, I thought, how they didn't seem to get any stick at all from the people in the house, nor I think from people in the rest of the school, as though their parents' lives and their lives were somehow different and the two didn't impinge. And I think that's one of the great strengths of this place, that you can, of course we got lots of these famous people, children, but once they're in the school environment, that doesn't seem to matter. They're just Fred, Joe, John, etc.
How do the boys react when someone's expelled?
On the whole, they act rather tribally and try to defend what the person has done. They're terrible occasions. They're really harrowing. I remember one time we were all in tears. I was in tears, my dame was in tears, the boys were in tears. It was quite awful. It's very traumatic.
And do they lobby you?
Well, it's all done by then. There's no point in lobbying me. It's all over. Yeah, well, the school takes quite a strong line on some things. I suppose the most obvious is drugs. We'd be daft to think that there were no drugs in here. There are from time to time, I'm sure. But when they are found out, the consequences are quite serious.
I come from a council estate, and I'm working class, and our kids get a lot more freedom. I'm amazed at how disciplined these boys are, and in fact the lack of freedom, because there's always someone watching them. They're always, in a sense, being supervised, maybe not directly, but there's always they're always well aware of the fact that even when they're in the road, masters can see them, staff can see them, and it will be commented on.
But do you think they're being watched in a kindly way, or do you think they're having the scruff of their neck held?
Oh no, I think it's if you like a benevolent deity.
Discipline is largely self-maintained, and most boys are active sportsmen with little time to get into mischief. In conventional accounts of a public school life, games are a means of sublimating the excessive energy of adolescent manhood. The parents of modern Etonians are more likely to be told that games sharpen the boys' competitive edge, teach them the value of teamwork, and instill in them that most English of virtues, how to lose gracefully. In the summer term, boys choose whether they will row or play cricket. They choose, in the school slang, whether to be a wet bob or a dry bob,